September air swept across Princeton University's historic campus. Carrying with it the sweet scent of autumn and possibility, golden leaves pirouetted through the air. Nature's confetti celebrating the start of another academic year. Among the centuries-old buildings and ivy-covered walls, destiny was about to unfold in the most unexpected way. Marcus Langston strode across the courtyard, his powerful frame cutting an impressive figure against the Gothic architecture. Standing 6'2" with shoulders that spoke of years of competitive swimming and skin the color of polished mahogany, he commanded attention without seeking it. His custom-tailored charcoal suit beneath a cashmere coat spoke of old money and newer ambitions, while his carelessly slung designer backpack suggested the casual confidence of youth. Time was not his friend that morning. The quarterly projections for his father's company had kept him up until dawn, the numbers dancing behind his closed eyelids even after he'd finally collapsed into bed. Now it ought. 7:04 a.m. He was dangerously close to being late for advanced economic theory. Professor Thompson's infamous three-strike policy had already claimed several victims this semester, and Marcus had no intention of becoming another statistic. He checked his Patek Philippe watch, a graduation gift from his father, and quickened his pace. The leather soles of his Oxford shoes clicked against the ancient cobblestones as he navigated through clusters of students, all lost in their own morning rituals of coffee cups and conversation. That's when fate intervened. Later, he would recall every detail of that moment with crystal clarity. The way the morning light slanted through the trees, the distant toll of the chapel bells marking the quarter hour, and the soft gasp that preceded the collision. Elise Moreau had been fighting her own battle with time that morning. Her arms were laden with medical textbooks. Gray's Anatomy balanced precariously atop principles of neuroscience. While essential clinical immunology threatened to escape her grip, her natural hair was swept up in an elegant crown of twisted coils, a few rebellious strands framing a face that belonged on magazine covers rather than buried in medical journals. She'd been reviewing her notes for her morning presentation on neuroplasticity while walking, a habit her roommate had warned would eventually lead to disaster. As she rounded the corner of the Humanities building, her prophecy came true in spectacular fashion. The collision was both inevitable and perfect in its choreography. Marcus, glancing at his watch one final time, stepped directly into Elise's path. Her books went airborne, pages fluttering like startled birds against the autumn sky. She stumbled, her ballet flats losing purchase on the smooth stones. Marcus's reflexes, honed by years of competitive sports, kicked in automatically. His arm shot out, catching her waist before she could fall. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath as they found themselves frozen in what could have been a scene from a classic Hollywood film. Their eyes met, and the busy courtyard faded away. Elise's eyes were extraordinary, deep brown with flecks of gold that caught the morning light, framed by lashes that seemed to go on forever. They widened slightly as they met Marcus's intense gaze, recognition flickering in their depths. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone knew of Marcus Langston, the business prodigy who was already sitting on the board of his father's company while maintaining a perfect GPA, but she'd never been close enough to notice how his eyes, despite their sharp intelligence, held a gentle warmth that his public persona rarely revealed. "I'm so sorry," they said simultaneously, then shared a surprised laugh that broke the spell. Marcus reluctantly released her waist, immediately missing the warmth of contact. They both knelt together to gather the scattered books, their hands brushing as they reached for the same volume. The touch sent an electric current through both of them, causing them to pause once again. "I should have been watching where I was going," Elise said, her voice carrying a melodic quality that caught Marcus off guard. "These books have been trying to escape all morning." "The fault is entirely mine," Marcus replied, picking up Gray's Anatomy and noting the careful annotations in the margins. Her handwriting was elegant yet precise, much like her. "I was too focused on not being late to Professor Thompson's class." "Advanced economic theory?" Elise asked. Accepting the book from him, their fingers brushed again, and neither rushed to break the contact. "I've heard his lectures are worth running for." "They are." Marcus smiled, revealing a dimple in his left cheek that had launched countless campus crushes. "Though I'm suddenly finding myself less concerned about punctuality." A slight blush colored Elise's cheeks, enhancing her natural beauty. She wore minimal makeup, just a hint of lip gloss that caught the light when she smiled. Her simple cream sweater and dark jeans spoke of understated elegance, a confidence that didn't need designer labels to make a statement. "I'm Marcus," he said, though he suspected she already knew. "Elise," she replied, tucking one of those rebellious strands behind her ear. Though after this morning's performance, you might know me better as the campus klutz. I was thinking more along the lines of the girl who made me forget about advanced economic theory, he countered, earning another smile that made his heart skip. The chapel bells chimed 9 times, reminding them both of their commitments. Elise glanced toward the medical building, then back at Marcus. You should probably have coffee with me later, he finished, surprising himself with his boldness. There was something about her that made him want to forget about classes, meetings, and everything else that usually consumed his thoughts. Elise hesitated, adjusting her grip on the recovered books. I have a full schedule today. Hospital rounds after classes. Dinner then. Marcus pressed gently. I know a place just off campus that serves the best Italian food this side of Venice. He paused, suddenly uncertain. Unless you're seeing someone, the smile that bloomed across her face was answer enough, but she shook her head anyway. No, I'm not seeing anyone, and I love Italian food. Marcus pulled out his phone, trying to contain his excitement as they exchanged numbers. Tidian? 7 sounds perfect. Elise agreed, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. As they parted ways, both stealing glances over their shoulders, neither could have known they had just begun writing the first page of an epic love story. The autumn breeze carried away their footsteps, but the electricity of their meeting lingered in the air like the last notes of a beautiful symphony. Professor Thompson would mark Marcus absent that day, but for the first time in his academic career, he couldn't bring himself to care. His mind was filled with golden-flecked brown eyes and a smile that made the morning sun seem dim in comparison. In her neuroanatomy class, Elise found herself doodling in the margins of her usually pristine notes. Her thoughts kept drifting to strong hands and gentle eyes, to the way her heart had raced at his touch, to the promise of dinner and possibilities. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. Elise's roommate, Nora, watched with amusement as she tried on and discarded outfit after outfit, finally settling on a deep burgundy dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly. The dress was elegant, yet comfortable, hitting just above her knees with a neckline that suggested rather than revealed. I've never seen you this nervous about a date, Nora observed, helping Elise choose accessories. And I've known you since freshman year. This feels different, Elise admitted, opting for simple pearl earrings, a graduation gift from her grandmother. He's not what I expected. You mean he's not the arrogant trust fund kid everyone makes him out to be? Nora teased, handing her a delicate gold bracelet. There's depth there, Elise said thoughtfully, remembering the warmth in his eyes, and something else. Something I can't quite define yet. At precisely 6:55 p.m., a knock echoed through their apartment. Elise opened the door to find Marcus standing there, having changed into a perfectly tailored navy suit that made him look like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. In his hands was a bouquet of white orchids, elegant, unique, and perfectly suited to her taste, though he couldn't have known that. You look breathtaking, he said softly, drinking in the sight of her. So do you, she replied, accepting the flowers with a smile that made his heart race all over again. As they walked to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that somehow managed not to seem ostentatious, their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. The evening air was cool and clear, stars beginning to peek through the darkening sky. Neither could have known then that this was more than just a first date. This was the beginning of a love story that would span years, weather storms, break hearts, and ultimately prove that true love, like the finest wine, only gets better with time. The autumn leaves continued their dance around them, nature's quiet witnesses to the moment two souls began their journey toward becoming one. And somewhere in the vast universe, destiny smiled, knowing that sometimes the best love stories begin with a collision of books, hearts, and dreams. On an ordinary September morning, ahead of them lay challenges and triumphs, passion and pain, separation and reunion. But for now, there was just this: 2 young hearts beating in sync, the promise of Italian food, and the kind of nervous excitement that comes with recognizing that something extraordinary is about to begin. As Marcus opened the car door for her, their eyes met once again, and in that moment, both felt it, the subtle shift in the universe that happens when 2 people who are meant to find each other finally do. The night was young, the future was unwritten, and love, in all its mysterious glory, was just beginning to unfold. Chapter 2. The courtship. Their first date at Giovanni's set the tone for everything that followed. The intimate Italian restaurant, with its flickering candlelight and soft violin music, created the perfect backdrop for 2 souls discovering each other. Marcus watched in fascination as Elise's eyes lit up while describing her passion for neuroscience, her hands moving expressively as she explained the intricacies of the human brain. "It's like an infinite universe inside our heads," she explained. Her voice filled with wonder. "Every neuron, every connection, tells a story. And we're just beginning to understand what those stories mean." Marcus found himself captivated, not just by her words, but by the passion behind them. Here was someone who saw the world with the same intensity he felt for business strategy. But instead of profit margins, she saw the potential to heal and understand the human mind. "What made you choose neuroscience?" he asked, genuinely curious. The way she spoke about it made him want to learn everything about her chosen field. Elise's expression softened, vulnerability flickering across her features. "My grandmother had Alzheimer's," she said quietly. "I watched this brilliant, vibrant woman slowly lose herself. I was 12 when she started forgetting my name. By 14, I decided I wanted to understand why, and maybe someday help prevent other families from going through the same thing." Marcus reached across the table, taking her hand in his. The gesture was instinctive, born from a desire to comfort and connect. "That's incredible," he said softly. "Most people would have run from that pain. You're choosing to face it head on." Their fingers intertwined naturally, and Elise felt a warmth spread through her chest at his understanding. "What about you?" she asked. "Was business always your destiny? Or did you have other dreams?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, absently tracing patterns on her palm with his thumb. "I used to want to be an architect," he admitted. "I loved the idea of creating spaces that could change how people live, work, and interact. But the family business, it's more than just a company. It's my father's legacy, his father's before him. When I was younger, I used to resent that predetermined path. Now, I see it as an opportunity to make a difference on a larger scale." The honesty in his voice touched something in Elise. Here was the real Marcus Langston, not the polished business prodigy everyone talked about, but a young man carrying the weight of generations while trying to forge his own path. That first evening stretched into hours of conversation, each discovery leading to new questions, new insights. When Marcus finally walked her back to her apartment, neither wanted the night to end. "I have an early class tomorrow," Elise said reluctantly, standing at her door. "I know," Marcus replied, still holding her hand, "but I'm already looking forward to seeing you again." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a whisper of possibility rather than a declaration. As Marcus pulled back, he saw his own wonder reflected in Elise's eyes. They both knew something extraordinary had begun. The weeks that followed were a symphony of shared moments, each one building upon the last. Late-night study sessions in the library became opportunities for deeper connection. Marcus would bring coffee and snacks, claiming a quiet corner where they could work side by side. He found himself fascinated by the way Elise highlighted her textbooks in different colors, creating a rainbow of medical knowledge. She, in turn, was impressed by his dedication to understanding complex business theories, the way he could look at a problem from multiple angles until he found the perfect solution. Sometimes, she would quiz him on economic principles, and he would help her memorize the intricate pathways of the nervous system. Their different academic pursuits, rather than creating distance, sparked endless curiosity between them. Marcus began reading medical journals in his spare time, wanting to understand Elise's world better. She found herself paying attention to business news, eager to discuss the latest developments with him. One particularly memorable evening, they were studying in Marcus's off-campus apartment when Elise noticed him sketching in the margins of his notebook. Peering over his shoulder, she saw detailed architectural drawings, buildings that seemed to reach for the sky while remaining grounded in practical functionality. "These are amazing," she breathed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You never told me you could draw like this." Marcus shrugged, but she could see the pleasure in his eyes at her praise. "Just a hobby now. Sometimes, when I'm thinking through a business problem, I find myself designing buildings instead." "Maybe they're not as different as you think," Elise suggested, sliding onto his lap with natural ease. "Business is about building too. Building relationships, building opportunities, building futures." He wrapped his arms around her waist, touched by her insight. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "It's a gift," she teased, then grew serious. "But really, it's because I see you, Marcus, not the heir to Langston Enterprises, not the business prodigy, just you." Their kiss then was deeper than their first, filled with growing understanding and deepening emotions. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he whispered. "I think I'm already there. Elise replied softly. Their relationship became the talk of campus, but not in the way either of them had feared. There was something so genuine about their connection that it transcended the usual gossip about the wealthy business student and the brilliant medical scholar. People would see them walking hand in hand between classes, lost in conversation, and smile at the obvious joy they took in each other's company. The seasons changed, autumn giving way to winter, and their love deepened like roots growing stronger beneath the frozen ground. They developed their own traditions. Sunday morning brunches at a tiny cafe, where the owner knew their orders by heart. Study dates that often turned into deep discussions about life and dreams. The surprise visits to each other's classes, just to share a quick kiss and a coffee. Elise discovered that beneath Marcus's confident exterior lay a tender heart that found expression in unexpected ways. He would leave little notes in her textbooks, encouraging messages before big exams, silly jokes to make her smile, or sometimes just "I love you" written in his precise handwriting. She began keeping them all in a small box, each one a testament to their growing love. Marcus found himself constantly amazed by Elise's capacity for compassion. She volunteered at the university hospital, spending time with patients who needed someone to talk to. He would watch her interact with them, seeing how she could make anyone feel heard and valued, and fall in love with her all over again. Their first real challenge came when Marcus's father had a minor heart attack. The news came during one of their study sessions, and without hesitation, Elise packed up both their books and drove him to New York. She stayed with him through the long hours in the hospital, her medical knowledge helping him understand the doctor's explanations, her presence a steady comfort in the sterile hallways. It was during this time that Marcus's father, Victor Langston, truly got to know the woman who had captured his son's heart. He observed how she supported Marcus while encouraging him to rest and take care of himself, how she asked intelligent questions about his condition and treatment, and, most importantly, how she made his usually serious son laugh even in tense moments. "She's exceptional," Victor told Marcus one evening when Elise had gone to get them all coffee. "Don't let her go, son." "I don't intend to," Marcus replied, watching the door through which she had disappeared. "She makes everything in my life better, Dad, clearer, more purposeful." The crisis passed, but the experience had changed their relationship. They had faced their first real test as a couple and emerged stronger. Marcus found himself thinking more and more about the future, their future. As their junior year progressed, they became known as one of those couples that seemed destined for forever. Their friends joked about wedding plans, and neither Elise nor Marcus bothered to deny that marriage was in their future. They had grown together, their individual dreams weaving into a shared vision of what their life could be. They supported each other through the stresses of academic life. Elise's grueling medical exams, Marcus's increasing responsibilities at his father's company. When one struggled, the other was there with encouragement, understanding, and often a home-cooked meal. Marcus had discovered a talent for cooking, much to Elise's delight. Their love wasn't just about the grand moments or dramatic declarations. It was about the quiet Sunday mornings spent reading the newspaper together, Elise's feet in Marcus's lap, as they shared sections. It was about the way he would massage her shoulders after a long day in the anatomy lab, or how she would listen to him practice important presentations, offering feedback and support. As their senior year approached, they had created a world of their own, one built on mutual respect, deep understanding, and a love that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. They had learned each other's habits, quirks, and insecurities, accepting and cherishing every aspect of who they were together and apart. Their friends often commented on how they seemed to communicate without words, just a look or a touch conveying volumes. They had developed their own language of love, expressed in small gestures and shared moments that meant everything to them. On a warm spring evening, as they walked through the campus garden where they had shared so many moments, Elise looked at Marcus and knew with absolute certainty that this was the man she wanted to spend her life with. He caught her gaze and smiled, the same certainty reflected in his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pulling her closer as they walked. "Us," she replied simply. "How far we've come since that morning when I nearly knocked you over with my books. Best collision of my life," he chuckled, kissing her temple, "though I still maintain it was my fault." "Maybe it was fate's fault," Elise suggested. "It knew exactly what it was doing." As they continued their walk, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, both felt the profound rightness of their connection. Their courtship had been more than just a romance. It had been a meeting of minds, a joining of souls, and the beginning of a love story that would face both triumph and tribulation in the years to come. Neither could have known then the challenges that lay ahead, but in that moment, secure in their love and shared dreams, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Their courtship had laid a foundation strong enough to weather any storm, built on trust, understanding, and a love that would prove both their greatest joy and their greatest test. Chapter 3. Young Love's Promise. The morning of graduation dawned with perfect clarity, the kind of spring day that seemed crafted specifically for new beginnings. The ancient oak trees that had witnessed countless commencements spread their newly green canopy over Princeton's campus, their leaves whispering promises of future possibilities. Elise stood before her mirror in her apartment, adjusting the graduation robe that hung perfectly over her dress. The deep blue silk dress had been a gift from Marcus, who claimed its color reminded him of the evening sky just before stars appeared. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, adorned with small pearl pins that had belonged to her grandmother. "You look beautiful, baby girl," her mother, Clara, said from the doorway. She moved forward to adjust Elise's graduation cap. Though it was already perfectly placed, the gesture was more about touching her daughter, reassuring herself that this moment was real. "Thanks, Mom," Elise smiled, catching her mother's hand and squeezing it. "I still can't believe we're here." Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered, referring to the man who had passed away when Elise was just 16. "Top of your class, accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School, you've exceeded every dream we had for you." Elise turned and hugged her mother tightly, careful not to disturb either of their outfits. "He's here with us," she said softly. "I felt him every step of the way." A knock at the door interrupted their emotional moment. Nora, Elise's roommate and closest friend, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a delivery for you, Elise." The delivery turned out to be a stunning bouquet of white orchids. Marcus's signature flower for her, accompanied by a handwritten note. Elise's heart fluttered as she opened it, recognizing his elegant handwriting. "My dearest Elise, today marks the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As I think about all we've achieved and all that lies ahead, I'm filled with gratitude for that fateful collision that brought you into my life. You've made every day since then brighter, every challenge more manageable, every success more meaningful. I can't wait to see you walk across that stage today, though I suspect my eyes will only be on you for the entire ceremony anyway. All my love, Marcus." Across campus, in his own apartment, Marcus was also preparing for the day. His custom-tailored black suit fit perfectly beneath his graduation robe, and the small velvet box in his pocket seemed to carry the weight of his entire future. He had planned everything meticulously, the timing, the location, the words he would say, yet his heart raced every time he thought about what he was about to do. "Nervous?" his father asked, straightening Marcus's tie, though it didn't need it. "About graduating?" "No." Marcus smiled, then patted his pocket. "About this? Terrified?" Victor Langston laughed softly. "I was too when I asked your mother, but when you know, you know. And, son, I've never seen two people more meant for each other than you and Elise." The graduation ceremony itself was a blur of speeches, names, and applause. Marcus, seated with the business school graduates, watched with pride as Elise delivered the valedictory address for the medical school. Her words about healing, hope, and the power of human connection moved the entire audience, but he knew she was speaking directly to him when she talked about how love could change the course of one's life. After the ceremony, families and friends scattered across the campus for photos and celebrations. Marcus found Elise among the crowd, their eyes meeting across the sea of graduation caps and proud parents. A smile passed between them, a private message of love and congratulation. They posed for countless photos with their families, with friends, with professors who had guided them through their academic journeys, but through it all, they kept finding their way back to each other, gravitating naturally, like planets in orbit. As the afternoon began to fade into evening, Marcus gently took Elise's hand. "Walk with me?" he asked softly. She nodded, recognizing something special in his tone. He led her away from the crowds toward their oak tree, the one where they had shared their first kiss, where they had studied countless afternoons, where they had sheltered from both rain and sun throughout their college years. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, casting a magical light over the campus. Beneath the ancient branches, Marcus turned to face Elise. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady as he began to speak. "Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?" he asked, taking both her hands in his. Elise smiled, her eyes sparkling with memory. I said, "I'm so sorry. After nearly knocking you over with my books." And I said the same thing at the exact same moment, Marcus continued. That synchronicity should have been my first clue that we were meant to be something special. From that very first moment, Elise, you've been in perfect harmony with my heart. He reached up to cup her cheek, his thumb gently brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. These past 2 years have been the most incredible of my life. You've challenged me to be better, supported me when I struggled, celebrated every victory as if it were your own. You've shown me that success isn't just about business deals and profit margins. It's about building a life rich in love, purpose, and meaning. Dropping to one knee, Marcus pulled the velvet box from his pocket. Elise's hands flew to her mouth as he opened it, revealing a stunning platinum ring, the center diamond flanked by smaller stones that caught the evening light, creating a constellation of sparkles. "This ring was my grandmother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "She made me promise to give it only to someone who made me feel the way my grandfather made her feel, like every day was an adventure, every moment precious, every challenge conquerable because we faced it together. Elise Moreau," he continued, looking up into her tear-filled eyes, "you are the love of my life, my best friend, my partner in everything. These past 2 years have been the beginning of our story, and I want to spend the rest of my life writing the next chapters with you. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to hold its breath in that moment. The evening breeze stilled, the distant sounds of celebration faded, and time itself seemed to pause, waiting for her answer. "Yes," Elise whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with slightly trembling hands, then stood to pull her into a passionate kiss. Their classmates, who had been hiding nearby at Marcus's request, burst into applause and cheers, cameras flashing to capture the moment for posterity. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, their families emerged from their hiding spots as well. Clara hugged them both, tears streaming down her face. Victor Langston beamed with pride, and even Marcus's normally reserved mother was openly emotional. "The ring fits perfectly," Elise marveled, looking at how it caught the last rays of sunlight. "I may have had some help with that," Nora admitted, grinning. "Someone had to make sure it would be perfect." The evening transformed into an impromptu engagement celebration. Their favorite restaurant, Giovanni's, had been reserved in advance, another part of Marcus's careful planning. The intimate Italian restaurant, where they had shared their first date, now hosted their first celebration as an engaged couple. Over pasta and wine, surrounded by their closest family and friends, they shared their hopes and dreams for the future. Elise's upcoming medical residency at Johns Hopkins, Marcus's plans to expand the family business into new markets, while maintaining their commitment to ethical business practices, their shared vision of a life built on love, mutual support, and dedication to making the world a better place. Later that night, after the celebrations had wound down, they found themselves back beneath their oak tree. The campus was quiet now, the excitement of graduation day having given way to peaceful stillness. Stars twinkled overhead, nature's diamonds competing with the sparkle of Elise's engagement ring. "I can't believe this is real," Elise said softly, leaning back against Marcus's chest as they sat on their favorite bench. "The graduation, the proposal, all of it feels like a dream." "The best kind of dream," Marcus murmured, kissing her temple. "The kind that comes true." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thoughts of the future they would build together. The challenges they would face seemed insignificant in that moment, overshadowed by the strength of their love and their commitment to each other. "Did you ever imagine, that first day when I nearly knocked you over, that we'd end up here?" Elise asked, turning to look up at him. Marcus smiled, remembering the moment with perfect clarity. "Actually, I did," he admitted. "Not the specifics, but I knew the moment I looked into your eyes that my life had changed forever. There was something about you, something that called to my soul in a way I'd never experienced before. And now we have forever," Elise whispered, reaching up to trace his jawline with gentle fingers. "Forever," Marcus agreed, capturing her hand and kissing her palm, "though even that doesn't seem like enough time to love you the way you deserve to be loved." As the night deepened around them, they remained in their private world, sharing kisses and dreams beneath the stars. Their oak tree stood sentinel over their promises, its ancient branches witness to another chapter in their love story. Neither could have known then the storms that lay ahead, the pressures of career and family obligations that would test their bond to its breaking point. But in that moment, Secure in their love and shared dreams, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The campus was quiet now, the excitement of graduation day having given way to peaceful stillness. Stars twinkled overhead, nature's diamonds competing with the sparkle of Elise's engagement ring. The future stretched before them like an unwritten book, its pages blank but promising, waiting to be filled with their story. As they finally walked back to Marcus's car, hand in hand beneath the starlit sky, they carried with them not just the joy of their engagement but the weight of all their promises: to love, to support, to cherish, to build a life worthy of the love they shared. Their story was just beginning, and though they couldn't see the challenges that lay ahead, their love felt strong enough to weather any storm. The oak tree watched them go, its leaves rustling in the night breeze, keeping safe the memories of this perfect day, the day when young love's promise was sealed with a ring, a kiss, and 1,000 dreams of forever. Chapter 4. The Wedding. The September morning dawned clear and crisp, as if nature itself had conspired to create the perfect day for a wedding. New York's St. Patrick's Cathedral stood majestic against the blue sky, its Gothic spires reaching heavenward like prayers made of stone. Inside, the ancient walls hummed with activity as florists transformed the already beautiful space into something magical. White orchids and roses cascaded from every arch, their delicate perfume mixing with the lingering scent of incense. Crystal chandeliers caught the light streaming through stained glass windows, creating rainbows that danced across the marble floors. It was a setting worthy of a fairy tale, which seemed appropriate for a love story like theirs. In a private suite at the Plaza Hotel, Elise sat before a mirror as her makeup artist put the finishing touches on her look. The wedding dress, a custom Vera Wang creation, hung nearby like a work of art. Its silk and lace seemed to capture and hold the morning light, the intricate beadwork creating constellations across the bodice. "You're so calm," Nora observed, adjusting her own bridesmaid's dress, a deep burgundy that complemented the autumn theme. "I expected at least a few nervous breakdowns by now." Elise smiled, meeting her best friend's eyes in the mirror. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," she said simply. "Everything else, the flowers, the music, the food, it's all just details. What matters is that at the end of today, Marcus and I will be husband and wife." Clara entered the room then, carrying a small velvet box. "Something borrowed," she said softly, opening it to reveal a stunning pearl and diamond necklace. "Your father gave this to me on our wedding day. He'd want you to wear it on yours." Tears threatened to ruin the perfect makeup as Elise hugged her mother. "He's here with us today," Clara whispered, echoing their words from graduation day. "In every smile, every happy tear, every moment of joy, he's here." Across the city, in another suite at the Plaza, Marcus was adjusting his bow tie for the 100th time. His custom Tom Ford tuxedo fit perfectly, but he couldn't seem to stop fidgeting with it. "Son," Victor Langston said, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Relax. You look perfect. I just want everything to be perfect for her," Marcus admitted, turning to face his father. "Elise deserved nothing less." Victor smiled, remembering his own wedding day jitters. "The only thing that needs to be perfect is your love for each other, and that already is." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Marcus's best man, his cousin Julian. "Car's ready," he announced. "Time to get you to the church before the bride thinks you've gotten cold feet." The cathedral was filled to capacity, over 1,000 guests, including family, friends, business associates, and what seemed like half the medical community of New York. The mixture of cultures and traditions was evident in the crowd. African-American families in their Sunday best sitting alongside old-money society types, young doctors and business prodigies, mingling with elderly relatives who had flown in from around the world. As the string quartet began to play, the wedding party made their entrance. The bridesmaids, led by Nora, processed down the aisle like autumn leaves dancing in the wind, their burgundy dresses creating a beautiful contrast against the white flowers. Then the music changed, the first notes of the bridal march filling the sacred space, and every guest rose to their feet. The massive doors opened, and there stood Elise, a vision in white, on the arm of her uncle, who would give her away in her father's absence. Marcus, waiting at the altar, felt his breath catch in his throat. The sight of her, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the cathedral doors, would be forever etched in his memory. Her dress seemed to float around her as she moved, the beaded bodice catching the light like stars, but it was her smile radiant and full of love that brought tears to his eyes. As she made her way down the aisle, time seemed to slow down. Each step brought her closer to their future together, each moment more precious than the last. When she finally reached him, and her uncle placed her hand in his, Marcus felt his heart might burst with joy. "You are stunning," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "So are you," she whispered back, squeezing his hand. The ceremony was a beautiful blend of traditions, honoring both their family's heritage and their shared faith. The Archbishop's words echoed through the cathedral as they exchanged their vows, promises of love, fidelity, and partnership that came straight from their hearts. "I, Marcus Victor Langston," his voice rang clear and strong, "take you, Elise Clara Moreau, to be my wife. I promise to love you unconditionally, to support you unfailingly, to honor and respect you all the days of my life, in times of joy and in times of hardship, in sickness and in health. I pledge myself to you completely and forever." Elise's voice trembled slightly with emotion as she repeated her own vows. "I, Elise Clara Moreau, take you, Marcus Victor Langston, to be my husband. I promise to love you without reservation, to support you in your goals and dreams, to laugh with you in times of joy and comfort you in times of sorrow. I give you my hand, my heart, and my love from this day forward. For as long as we both shall live." The exchange of rings was handled with equal gravity and joy. The platinum bands, inscribed with their initials and wedding date, symbolized their eternal commitment to each other. As Marcus slipped the ring onto Elise's finger, joining it with her grandmother's engagement ring, he marveled at how right it looked there, as if her hand had always been meant to wear his ring. When the Archbishop finally pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was both tender and passionate, a perfect expression of their love. The cathedral erupted in applause and cheers, the joy of the moment too great to be contained by traditional church decorum. The reception at the plaza's grand ballroom was nothing short of magical. The space had been transformed into an autumn wonderland, with thousands of white orchids and burgundy roses, creating a romantic backdrop. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the proceedings, while candlelight made everything seem to shimmer. Their first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, the classic song perfectly capturing the feeling of finally being together as husband and wife. As they moved across the dance floor, lost in each other's eyes, their guests watched with smiles and happy tears. "I love you, Mrs. Langston," Marcus murmured, pulling her closer. "I love you too, Mr. Langston," Elise replied, her head resting on his shoulder, "always and forever." The evening progressed like a beautiful dream. The food was exquisite, the champagne flowed freely, and the dance floor was never empty. The gospel choir that had performed during the ceremony returned for a special performance that had everyone on their feet. Speeches from family and friends brought both laughter and tears. Nora spoke about watching their love story unfold from the beginning, while Julian shared childhood stories about Marcus that had the crowd roaring with laughter. Victor Langston's speech was particularly moving. When Marcus first told me about Elise, he said, his voice filled with emotion, I could see something in his eyes I'd never seen before. It was as if he'd found not just love, but purpose. "Elise, you haven't just married my son. You've completed our family. Welcome home, daughter." Clara's toast to the couple spoke of love's ability to transcend loss and create new beginnings. "My late husband would have loved you like a son, Marcus," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "But I know he's here in spirit, celebrating with us and blessing this beautiful union." As the evening wore on, Marcus and Elise found a quiet moment alone on the balcony overlooking the city. The October air was crisp, but neither felt the cold. Wrapped in each other's arms. "Happy?" Marcus asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than I ever thought possible," Elise replied, turning in his embrace to face him. "Thank you for making all my dreams come true." "Our dreams," he corrected gently, "and this is just the beginning." The party continued well into the night, a joyous celebration of love and new beginnings. When it was finally time to leave, they made their way through a shower of rose petals to the waiting Rolls-Royce that would take them to their honeymoon suite. As they drove through the city streets, now quiet in the early morning hours, Elise and Marcus held each other close, both reflecting on the perfect day and dreaming of their future together. The next morning, they would leave for their honeymoon 2 weeks in the Maldives, where they would have nothing to do but enjoy each other's company and begin their life as husband and wife. But for now, in the quiet of their wedding night, they were content to simply be together, reveling in the knowledge that they had promised themselves to each other forever. Their wedding day had been everything they dreamed of and more, a perfect beginning to what they were sure would be a perfect life together. If they could have seen the challenges that lay ahead, Would they have done anything differently? Perhaps not. For true love isn't about avoiding storms, it's about weathering them together. For now, though, there were only sweet dreams and tender promises, passionate kisses and gentle touches, as they began their journey as husband and wife. Their love story, which had begun with a chance collision on a college campus, had reached a new chapter, and they were ready to face whatever the future might hold together. Chapter 5. The Descent. The beginning of the end started so subtly that neither of them noticed at first. Life in their penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park continued as it had during their first blissful year of marriage, filled with morning kisses, shared dreams, and plans for the future. Elise was thriving in her residency at New York Presbyterian, while Marcus continued to expand Langston Enterprises under his father's proud guidance. The first crack appeared on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Elise had prepared a special dinner to celebrate completing her first year of residency. But Marcus's chair remained empty as the candles burned lower and the carefully prepared food grew cold. When he finally arrived home at nearly midnight, his apology was sincere, his kiss tender, but something had shifted, a barely perceptible change in the atmosphere of their home. "I'm so sorry, love," he said, loosening his tie as Elise reheated his plate. "The Beijing deal is more complicated than we anticipated, and the time difference means these calls have to happen late." Elise smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I understand. There will be other celebrations." But there were other celebrations missed. Other dinners that grew cold. Other moments that slipped away in the name of business. Still, they adapted, as strong couples do. Elise learned to cook meals that could be easily reheated, and Marcus made an effort to call when he knew he'd be late. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday in March when the call came. Marcus was in a board meeting when his secretary interrupted with news that would alter the course of their lives. Victor Langston had suffered a massive heart attack in his office. Elise was the one who answered Marcus's frantic call, who met him at the hospital, who held his hand as they waited for news. Her medical training allowed her to understand the gravity of the situation even before the doctors delivered their somber verdict. Victor Langston was gone. The following days were a blur of funeral arrangements, press releases, and business contingencies. Marcus moved through it all like a man underwater, his grief evident only in the tight set of his jaw and the shadows under his eyes. Elise was his anchor, handling what she could and supporting him through what she couldn't. The funeral was a grand affair. Befitting a man of Victor Langston's stature, business leaders from around the world flew in to pay their respects, and the business press covered it extensively. Through it all, Marcus maintained the composed demeanor expected of the new CEO of Langston Enterprises, but Elise could feel him trembling when they held hands. It was only later that night, in the privacy of their home, that Marcus finally broke down. Elise held him as he sobbed, his grief raw and overwhelming. "I don't know if I'm ready," he confessed into her shoulder. "Dad had 20 more years of experience, of connections, of knowledge. How can I possibly fill his shoes?" "You don't have to fill his shoes," Elise said softly, stroking his back. "You just have to walk your own path, and you're not alone. I'm right here with you." But the reality of running a global corporation at 30 began to take its toll. The Beijing deal that had been complicated under Victor's leadership became a crucial test of Marcus's ability to lead. Board members who had known him since childhood now watched his every move with scrutiny, some hoping for success, others perhaps waiting for failure. Marcus began working longer hours, his father's office becoming more familiar than his own home. Elise supported him as best she could, but her own career demands as a resident neurosurgeon left little flexibility. Their once frequent dinners together became rare occasions, their passionate lovemaking reduced to quick moments between exhausted sleep and early morning alarms. The subtle changes became more pronounced. Marcus started keeping a change of clothes at the office, sometimes not coming home for days when major deals were in negotiations. Elise's attempts to discuss their drifting relationship were met with distracted nods and promises to talk about it later, a later that never seemed to come. Their 5th wedding anniversary passed with only a rushed breakfast and exchanged gifts. Marcus had his assistant order flowers and a beautiful necklace, while Elise's carefully planned surprise dinner sat untouched in their refrigerator. He had to fly to London for an emergency board meeting, and she was called in for an unexpected surgery. The distance between them grew, not in dramatic fights or bitter arguments, but in the accumulation of small moments, missed connections, left unmade touches that never happened. Their apartment, once filled with laughter and love, became increasingly quiet, more like a hotel they both occasionally visited than a home they shared. One particular evening marked a turning point. Elise had taken a rare day off to prepare for an important conversation. The pregnancy test she'd taken that morning had shown 2 pink lines, and her heart had soared with joy and anticipation. She prepared Marcus's favorite meal, set the table with their wedding china, and waited. Hours passed. Her calls went to voicemail. The food grew cold again. When Marcus finally arrived home at 3 a.m., he was too exhausted to notice the setup, too preoccupied with a crisis in the Asian markets to see the tears in Elise's eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice small in the darkness of their bedroom. "Can it wait until morning?" He mumbled. "Already half asleep. The Shanghai exchange opens in a few hours, and I need to be ready." Elise lay awake that night, one hand resting on her still flat stomach, feeling more alone than she ever had. The next day, a complication ended the pregnancy before she ever got to share the news. She handled the medical procedures alone, took 2 days off work, and returned to their routine as if nothing had happened. Marcus, consumed by a hostile takeover attempt of a key subsidiary, never knew their communication, once so effortless, became increasingly strained. Conversations that used to flow naturally now felt like navigating a minefield, each person careful not to disturb the fragile peace they maintained. They became experts at avoiding the real issues, discussing schedules and logistics instead of feelings and fears. The breaking point came gradually. Then all at once, it was another missed dinner, another cold meal, another night of Elise eating alone at their massive dining table. But this time, something in her snapped. When Marcus came home near midnight, he found her sitting in the dark living room, still in her doctor's coat. "Elise," he asked, concern finally breaking through his perpetual distraction, "what's wrong?" "Do you remember the last time we really talked?" she asked quietly. "Not about schedules or business or hospital shifts, but really talked about us, about our dreams, about anything that matters." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. The silence was answer enough. "I lost our baby," she said finally, her voice breaking. "2 months ago, I was going to tell you the night you had to fly to London. I waited up all night with dinner ready and joy in my heart, and you never came home. I lost our baby, and I went through it alone. And you never even knew because you're never really here anymore." The color drained from Marcus's face as the weight of her words hit him. He took a step toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I understand that you're carrying the weight of your father's legacy," she continued. "I understand that the company needs you, but I need you too, Marcus. We need you. And you haven't been here not really for a long time. Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Tell you when?" she asked, tears finally falling. "Between board meetings? During your 3-minute coffee breaks? In the 5 minutes between when you fall into bed and when you're asleep? When exactly was I supposed to tell you that we created a life? And I lost it. All while you were building your empire." The silence that followed was deafening. They stared at each other across the room, the distance between them suddenly seeming vast and unbridgeable. All the missed moments, the unspoken words, the gradual growing apart it all, crystallized in that moment. "We can fix this," Marcus said finally, desperation in his voice. "I'll cut back on work, delegate more, make time." "Can we?" Elise interrupted softly. "Look me in the eyes and tell me that you can step back from the company right now, when you're in the middle of 3 major acquisitions and expanding into new markets. Tell me you can do that without resenting me for making you choose." He couldn't answer, and they both knew why. The company needed him. Hundreds of employees depended on his leadership. Thousands of shareholders watched every move. His father's legacy hung in the balance. "I think," Elise said, her voice trembling but determined, "we need to consider that maybe loving each other isn't enough if we can't actually be present in that love." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth and pain. That night, Elise slept in the guest room for the first time in their marriage. The next morning, she called a divorce attorney. The following weeks were a blur of painful conversations and painful silences. They tried counseling, but their schedules made it nearly impossible to attend sessions together. They tried setting boundaries around work hours, but emergencies and urgent deals always seemed to break them. Finally, sitting in their living room with their respective lawyers, they agreed that ending their marriage while they still loved each other was better than letting it dissolve into bitterness and resentment. The papers were drawn up, assets were divided. Elise refused anything more than what she'd brought into the marriage, despite Marcus's protests, and their love story seemed to be ending. The day they signed the papers, both their hands trembled. The judge asked if they were sure, giving them one last chance to reconsider. They looked at each other then, both remembering the young couple who had fallen in love over textbooks and coffee, who had promised forever under an oak tree, who had danced their first dance as husband and wife, with such hope in their hearts. "Yes," they said in unison, their voices breaking on that single syllable. Afterward, they shared one last embrace in the courthouse corridor. Marcus breathed in the familiar scent of her perfume, and Elise memorized the feeling of his arms around her. When they finally let go, both their faces were wet with tears. "I'll always love you," Marcus whispered. "I'll always love you too," Elise replied. But sometimes love isn't enough. They parted ways there, each heading to their separate careers, their separate lives. The descent from perfect love to painful separation was complete, though neither's heart had truly let go. They didn't know then that fate wasn't finished with their story, that sometimes the end is really just another beginning in disguise. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. The Manhattan family court building stood imposing against the gray October sky, its stone facade as cold and impersonal as the proceedings that took place within its walls. Elise sat in her car for several long minutes, watching raindrops trace paths down the windshield and trying to steady her trembling hands. Today was the day they would officially end their marriage. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, the dark circles under her eyes barely concealed by makeup, her natural hair pulled back in a simple but elegant style. The navy blue suit she wore was new. She couldn't bear to wear anything from her life with Marcus today. Across town, Marcus was having a similar moment of hesitation in his office at Langston Enterprises. The divorce papers sat on his desk, waiting for his final signature. He'd read them so many times he had memorized every word, every legal phrase that would dismantle the life they had built together. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Langston, your lawyer called. They're waiting at the courthouse." Marcus closed his eyes, memories washing over him. Their first meeting, their wedding day. Countless small moments of joy and love that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. The weight of his father's watch on his wrist seemed heavier today, a reminder of all he had lost and all he was trying to preserve. The drive to the courthouse was a blur. His driver, Henry, no relation to his father, but the shared name always brought a pang, kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror with concern. Marcus realized he hadn't spoken a word since leaving the office. They arrived at the courthouse, just as Elise was climbing the steps. Even now, the sight of her made his heart skip a beat. She paused when she saw him, and for a moment, they just looked at each other across the rain-washed plaza. Their lawyers flanked them as they walked into the building, a strange sort of honor guard for the death of their marriage. The courthouse was busy, full of other people's dramas and legal battles, but Marcus and Elise moved through it all in their own bubble of quiet grief. The administrative procedures seemed simultaneously endless and too quick, each signature, each initialed page bringing them closer to the end. Their lawyers, Laura Bennett for Elise and Daniel Carter for Marcus, handled most of the talking, their voices a professional monotone as they went through the final details. "Mrs. Langston has declined any claim to the business assets," Laura was saying, "and wishes to revert to her maiden name, Moreau." The sound of Elise giving up his name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He remembered how proud he'd been the first time he'd heard someone call her Mrs. Langston. How natural it had sounded. How right. "Mr. Langston has arranged for Miss Moreau to retain the apartment on Central Park West," Daniel added, "though she has repeatedly declined. I have my own place now," Elise said quietly, her first words since they'd entered the building. "I don't need anything from the marriage except closure." Their eyes met across the conference table, and suddenly they were both back in their kitchen on that last night, the night when all the unspoken things had finally been said, the night when they both realized that sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people together when life pulls them in different directions. The judge's chamber was smaller than they'd expected, more intimate, which somehow made it worse. Judge Margaret Sullivan had been handling divorce cases for 20 years, but something about this couple made her pause. There was none of the usual anger or bitterness she typically saw. Instead, there was a palpable sense of loss, of love, not dead but sacrificed. "Before we proceed," Judge Sullivan said, looking at them over her reading glasses, "I need to ask, are you both certain this is what you want? The law requires me to confirm that this decision is being made freely and without coercion. But I'm also asking as someone who has seen thousands of couples sit where you're sitting now." The silence that followed her question seemed to stretch forever. Elise looked at Marcus, really looked at him, seeing the strain of the past year etched in lines that hadn't been there when they'd married. He'd lost weight, and the shadows under his eyes matched her own. Marcus met her gaze, seeing the woman he'd fallen in love with that autumn morning on campus, the brilliant medical student who'd become a gifted surgeon, the wife who'd supported him through his father's death, only to lose him to the very legacy he was trying to preserve. "Your Honor," Elise began, her voice soft but steady. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to let them go. We're not ending our marriage because we stopped loving each other. We're ending it because we love each other enough to not want to watch that love turn to resentment," Marcus added, his voice rough with emotion. Judge Sullivan nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "Very well. Let the record show that both parties have affirmed their desire to proceed with the dissolution of their marriage." The legal language washed over them as the judge continued. Words like irreconcilable differences and mutual agreement, trying and failing to capture the complexity of their situation. When it came time for the final signatures, both their hands trembled. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York," Judge Sullivan said finally, "I hereby dissolve this marriage." The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that would affect them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. It was done. 5 years of marriage, years of love, countless dreams and promises, all officially ended with the strike of a gavel. They walked out of the judge's chambers in silence, their lawyers tactfully giving them space as they made their way through the courthouse corridors. Neither spoke until they reached the main entrance, where the rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean and unfamiliar. "Elise," Marcus said softly, reaching for her hand before catching himself. She turned to him, tears finally spilling over despite her best efforts. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." They moved toward each other as if pulled by gravity, falling into one last embrace. Marcus breathed in the scent of her hair, trying to memorize everything about this moment. Elise clutched at his suit jacket, her tears leaving dark spots on the expensive fabric. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be what you needed." "I'm sorry too," she replied, her voice muffled against his chest. "I'm sorry we couldn't find a way." When they finally pulled apart, both their faces were wet with tears. Elise reached up and gently wiped a tear from his cheek, the gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "Don't work too hard." He caught her hand before she could pull it away, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You too. Save lots of lives. Change the world, like you always wanted to." Their lawyers approached then, respectfully signaling that it was time to go. Elise turned away first, walking toward her car with Laura beside her. Marcus watched her go, remembering another parting on their college campus years ago, when they had been young and certain that their love could conquer anything. Just before getting into her car, Elise looked back. Marcus was still standing there, the man she had loved since she was 21, the man she would probably love for the rest of her life. Their eyes met one last time across the rain-washed plaza. Then she got into her car, and he turned toward his, and they drove away in opposite directions. That night, alone in her new apartment, Elise took off her wedding ring for the first time since Marcus had placed it on her finger. She held it up to the light, watching it sparkle just as it had on their wedding day. After a long moment, she placed it in a small velvet box along with her engagement ring, tucking them away in a drawer, but unable to completely let them go. In his office, Marcus stood at the window overlooking the city lights, a glass of scotch untouched in his hand. On his desk, a photo caught his eye. Their wedding day, both of them laughing at something just before the ceremony. He picked it up, tracing her smile through the glass. "I'll always love you," he whispered to the empty room. Miles apart, they both lay awake that night, feeling the weight of their decision in the silence of their separate beds. Neither knew that this ending was really just an intermission in their love story, that fate would give them another chance to get it right. But for now, there was only the sound of rain returning to the city, washing away the day that had seen the end of their marriage, if not their love. The breaking point had come and gone, leaving them both broken but still standing, still breathing, still holding on to the love they shared even as they let each other go. They had promised till death do us part. But sometimes life has other plans. Sometimes love has to take a longer, harder road to find its way home. As they finally drifted off to sleep in their separate homes, neither could have known that their story wasn't over. It was just waiting for the right moment to begin again. Chapter 7. Separate Lives. Time moves differently when you're learning to live without someone you love. For Elise and Marcus, the months following their divorce felt both endless and fleeting. Each day a new lesson in how to exist in a world that no longer contained their shared life. Elise threw herself into her work at New York Presbyterian with renewed intensity. Her colleagues noticed a change in her, a fierce focus that made her already impressive surgical skills even sharper. She moved through her days with determined precision, as if keeping her hands steady in surgery could somehow keep her heart from trembling. Her new apartment in Brooklyn was everything. Her home with Marcus wasn't. Small, cozy, filled with warm colors and soft textures, she'd furnished it entirely with pieces they'd never shared, creating a space that was completely her own. Yet sometimes, in the quiet of evening, she would find herself reaching for a second coffee mug or turning to share a thought with someone who wasn't there. The only trace of her previous life was a small box hidden in her bedside drawer containing her wedding and engagement rings and a single photo from their wedding day. She never opened it, but knowing it was there brought both comfort and pain. Across the city, Marcus immersed himself in expanding Langston Enterprises. Under his leadership, the company grew rapidly, acquiring new subsidiaries and entering markets his father had only dreamed of reaching. Business magazines praised his bold vision and strategic mind, but none of their glossy photos captured the emptiness in his eyes when he returned to his penthouse each night. He'd kept their old apartment, unable to bear the thought of someone else living in the space where they'd been so happy, but he rarely spent time there now, preferring to work late into the night in his office. The view of Central Park from his window reminded him too much of morning coffees shared with Elise, of lazy Sunday afternoons spent planning their future. Their paths nearly crossed several times in those first few months. At a charity gala for the hospital, Marcus caught a glimpse of her across the room, stunning in a deep blue gown, and felt his heart stop for a moment. Elise saw him too, but by the time she gathered the courage to approach his position, he had already left. Another time, Elise was getting coffee at their old favorite cafe when she saw his car pull up outside. She slipped out the back door, leaving her untouched drink behind, her hands shaking too much to hold it anyway. Their friends tried to help them move on. Nora constantly tried to set Elise up with eligible doctors, while Julian encouraged Marcus to date one of the many socialites who showed interest in New York's most eligible bachelor. But both Elise and Marcus found themselves comparing every potential connection to what they had lost, and everyone fell short. Work became their shared escape, though they took different paths. Elise pioneered a new surgical technique for treating brain tumors, her research gaining attention in medical journals. She began speaking at conferences, her natural warmth and intelligence making her a sought-after presenter. Marcus's business acumen seemed to sharpen in his pain. He could see opportunities others missed, could negotiate deals that seemed impossible, could turn failing companies around with strategic precision. The business world watched in amazement as Langston Enterprises doubled its market value in just 18 months. But success brought its own kind of loneliness. Late at night, after particularly challenging surgeries, Elise would find herself reaching for her phone to call Marcus, wanting to share her achievements with the one person who had always understood her drive. She would catch herself halfway through dialing his number, which she still knew by heart. Marcus faced similar moments. After closing major deals, his first instinct was still to call Elise, to hear her proud voice telling him she knew he could do it. Instead, he would stand at his office window, looking out over the city they both called home, wondering if she was thinking of him too. Their separate lives developed new rhythms, new patterns. Elise joined a yoga studio, finding peace in the controlled movements and measured breathing. She adopted a cat, a gray rescue she named Shadow, who kept her company during lonely nights of research and case studies. Marcus took up running, pounding the paths of Central Park in the early morning hours when the city was still quiet. He would sometimes pause near their old favorite spot, remembering weekend picnics and stolen kisses, before forcing himself to run faster, as if he could outpace the memories. The seasons changed. Marking time's passage, autumn came again, painting the city in colors that reminded them both of their first meeting. Elise found herself taking different routes to work, avoiding the Princeton campus when she had to visit New Jersey for consultations. Marcus canceled a business trip to Princeton, sending Julian instead. Their divorce had been amicable, their love for each other preventing any bitterness from taking root. But that same love made moving on impossible. How do you find someone new when you know you've already met your soulmate? Elise dated exactly once in that first year, a brilliant neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins who shared her passion for research. He was kind, intelligent, and clearly interested in more than a professional relationship. But when he kissed her goodnight after their third dinner together, all she could think about was how different it felt from Marcus's kisses. Marcus didn't even try dating. His mother, worried about his isolation, tried to introduce him to the daughters of her society friends. He was unfailingly polite but distant, his mind always elsewhere. How could he explain that his heart was still living in Brooklyn, working impossible hours at New York Presbyterian? They both developed new habits to avoid accidental meetings. Elise started shopping at different stores, trying new restaurants, creating a geography of the city that wouldn't remind her of their shared past. Marcus did the same, though sometimes he would deliberately walk past places they used to love, touching the pain of missing her like pressing on a bruise to make sure it still hurt. Their friends noticed how they both checked their phones whenever the other was mentioned, how they both kept track of each other's achievements through mutual acquaintances. Nora would casually mention Marcus's latest business success to Elise, watching how her friend's eyes would light up with pride before dimming with remembered loss. Julian would tell Marcus about Elise's groundbreaking research, seeing how his cousin would smile softly before retreating into his work. The hardest moments were the holidays. Their first Christmas apart, Elise volunteered for extra shifts at the hospital, throwing herself into helping others to avoid thinking about the traditions they'd created together. Marcus spent the holiday in London, closing a deal that could have waited until January, both of them finding different ways to hide from their memories. Their wedding anniversary passed unmarked, but not unfelt. Elise performed 3 surgeries that day, her hands steady even as her heart trembled. Marcus sat through 8 meetings, his voice never wavering, though his thoughts kept drifting to a sunny day in St. Patrick's Cathedral. Spring came again, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to mock their continued separation. The city bloomed around them, but they remained in their separate orbits, 2 planets that had broken free of their shared gravity but couldn't quite escape each other's pull. Elise's mother visited, worried about her daughter's increasing focus on work. Healing others is important, Clara told her over dinner in her cozy Brooklyn apartment. But don't forget to heal yourself. I'm fine, Mom, Elise insisted, though they both knew it wasn't true. I'm doing important work, making a difference. You and Marcus both, Clara observed gently. I saw his picture in the Times business section. He looks tired. Elise had seen the same photo but wouldn't admit to keeping track of his press coverage. He's building his father's legacy, she said softly. It's what he needs to do. Their lives continued in parallel, each achieving remarkable success in their chosen fields while carrying the quiet ache of their shared loss. They were both living proof that you can function perfectly well with a broken heart, can even thrive in your chosen profession while nursing a soul-deep wound. Then came the invitation that would change everything. A charity gala supporting medical research, hosted by Langston Enterprises in partnership with New York's major hospitals. As head of neurosurgery research, Elise couldn't decline. As CEO of the hosting company, Marcus had to attend. Neither knew that fate was about to intervene, that their carefully constructed separate lives were about to collide once again. All they knew was the familiar flutter of anticipation and fear at the thought of seeing each other again, of being in the same room, breathing the same air. The night of the gala approached, carrying with it the possibility of reunion, of reconciliation, of reopening wounds that had never really healed. Their separate lives had brought them success, recognition, and achievement, but not happiness, not the kind of deep, soul-satisfying joy they had known together. As they prepared for the event in their separate homes, both Elise and Marcus felt the weight of possibility settling around them. Neither could have known that this gala would be more than just another charity event. It would be the beginning of their next chapter. For now, though, they remained apart, each carrying the other in their heart like a secret too precious to share, too painful to forget. Their separate lives had become a kind of holding pattern, waiting for something to change, for some sign that their story wasn't over. That sign was coming, though they didn't know it yet. Sometimes, the hardest part of a love story is the middle, the part where the lovers have lost their way but haven't yet found their way back to each other. Elise and Marcus were living in that middle space, their hearts beating in sync across the city that had witnessed both their joy and their pain. Their separate lives had taught them many things about strength, about resilience, about the ability to function while carrying an ocean of loss inside. But the most important lesson was still to come. Sometimes love takes the longest route home, but it always finds its way back to where it belongs. Chapter 8. The Reunion. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom glittered like a dream. Transformed for the Langston Foundation's annual charity gala, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the space, while arrangements of white orchids Marcus hadn't been able to bring himself to choose any other flower filled the air with their subtle perfume. Elise stood before her mirror at home, smoothing the fabric of her gown. a deep burgundy creation that hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. She'd lost weight in the past year, but the dress had been tailored perfectly. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, small diamond earrings, a gift from her mother, catching the light. "You look stunning," Nora said from the doorway of Elise's bedroom. As her closest friend and fellow surgeon, she'd appointed herself moral support for the evening. "Are you ready for this?" "No," Elise admitted, checking her subtle makeup one last time. "But I don't have a choice. The hospital needs this partnership with Langston Enterprises." Across town, Marcus adjusted his bow tie in his office bathroom. He'd chosen to work late rather than go home to change. Knowing the penthouse held too many memories of getting ready for events with Elise, his tuxedo was impeccable, as always. But his eyes held a tension that no amount of business success could erase. "The guest list is confirmed," his assistant reported through the door. "Dr. Moreau's attendance has been verified." Marcus closed his eyes at the sound of her name, not Mrs. Langston anymore. He reminded himself, "Thank you, Sarah. The car will be here in 20 minutes. The gala was already in full swing when Elise arrived. She paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath before stepping into the familiar space. The last time she'd been here had been her wedding reception, but she pushed that thought away firmly. She made her way through the crowd, stopping to greet colleagues and board members. As head of neurosurgery research, she was expected to mingle, to help secure funding for their programs. She kept her smile professional, her conversation focused on medical advances and research needs. Then she felt it, that familiar electricity in the air that had always signaled his presence. She turned slowly, and there he was. Marcus stood across the room, engaged in conversation with a group of executives, but his eyes were fixed on her. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the crowd fading into a blur of background noise and movement. He looked thinner, she noticed, the planes of his face more sharply defined. Success had left its mark in the confident set of his shoulders, but she could see the fatigue around his eyes that no one else would notice. For his part, Marcus felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Elise was even more beautiful than he remembered, the burgundy of her dress making her skin glow. She'd always been stunning, but there was a new strength in her bearing, a confidence that came from standing on her own. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, they were back in college, meeting for the first time after their collision in the courtyard, the same spark, the same recognition of something profound and life-changing. It was Marcus who moved first, excusing himself from his group and making his way toward her. Elise's heart pounded as he approached, her hand instinctively reaching for a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Dr. Moreau," he said softly when he reached her, the formality feeling strange on his tongue. "Thank you for coming tonight." "Mr. Langston," she replied, matching his tone while trying to ignore how her body hummed with awareness of his proximity. "The hospital appreciates your foundation's support." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, all their shared history hanging heavy between them. How do you make small talk with someone who knows your soul? "You look beautiful," he said finally, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "Burgundy always was your color." Elise felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look well too," she managed. "I've been reading about your successes in the business papers, and I've been following your research," he admitted. "Your new surgical technique is revolutionary." The music changed then, a slow melody that they both recognized, At Last by Etta James, their wedding song. Their eyes met again, shared memories reflecting between them. "Would you like to dance?" Marcus asked impulsively. For old time's sake, she should have said no. It was too dangerous, too intimate, but her hand was already reaching for his, her body remembering the way they fit together before her mind could protest. They moved onto the dance floor, maintaining a respectable distance that still felt too close, and not close enough. His hand on her waist was warm through the silk of her dress, sending shivers along her spine. Her hand in his felt like coming home. "I miss you," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Every day." Elise's breath caught in her throat. "Marcus, I know," he said quickly. "I know we can't. I just needed you to know that." They danced in silence for a moment, both acutely aware of the eyes on them, the divorced power couple reunited on the dance floor. It would be gossip fodder for weeks. "How's Shadow?" he asked, surprising her. At her questioning look, he added, "Nora mentioned you adopted a cat." "She's good," Elise said softly, touched that he'd asked. "She keeps me company when I'm up late reviewing cases. Still working too hard," he noted. "Look who's talking," she countered with a small smile. "I've seen the hours you keep at the office." The music ended, but neither moved to step away immediately. Finally, reluctantly, they separated. "Would you like to get some air?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the terrace. "It's getting warm in here." Elise knew she should decline, but found herself nodding instead. They made their way through the French doors onto the terrace. The cool night air a relief after the warmth of the ballroom. The New York skyline sparkled before them, a familiar view they'd shared countless times before. Elise moved to the railing, looking out over the city they both loved. "Do you remember," Marcus said, coming to stand beside her, "the night I proposed? You were wearing a blue dress, and the stars seemed especially bright." "Of course I remember," she said softly. "I remember everything." He turned to look at her then, really look at her. The year apart had changed them both, but her eyes were the same, those beautiful brown eyes with flecks of gold that he'd fallen into the first time they met. "Elise," he started, but she shook her head. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, we can't go back." "What if I don't want to go back?" he asked, moving closer. "What if I want to go forward, but differently this time?" The air between them crackled with tension. Elise could smell his cologne, the same one he'd always worn, the scent bringing back a flood of memories. "We tried," she reminded him. "We couldn't make it work. We were younger then," he said, less experienced, less aware of what we had to lose. He reached out, gently touching her cheek. Elise closed her eyes at the contact, unable to stop herself from leaning into his hand. "I've learned," he continued softly. "This past year, running the company without you in my life, I've learned what really matters." Elise opened her eyes to find him much closer than before. "What matters?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You," he said simply. "Us. Everything else is just details." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable. His lips met hers softly at first, then with increasing intensity as years of love and longing took over. Elise's arms wound around his neck as his wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. They broke apart only when the need for air became urgent, both breathing heavily. The sounds of the gala drifted out to them, a reminder of where they were. "Come home with me," Marcus whispered against her lips. "Please." She knew she should say no, knew this was dangerous, complicated, potentially heartbreaking. But her heart had never fully accepted their separation, and her body remembered his too well to refuse. The ride to his penthouse was charged with electric tension. They sat close but not touching in the back of his car, both aware that a single contact might shatter their fragile control. The elevator ride was torture, the confined space filled with unspoken words and barely restrained desire. When they finally reached his floor, it was like a dam breaking. Their kisses were hungry now, desperate with need and memories. Clothes fell away as they made their way to his bedroom, hands relearning familiar paths, lips rediscovering sensitive spots. "You're more beautiful than I remembered," Marcus murmured, trailing kisses down her neck. Elise's response was lost in a moan as his lips found a particularly sensitive spot, her hands roaming his back, feeling the increased muscle definition from his morning runs. Their lovemaking was both familiar and new. They knew each other's bodies intimately, but the year apart had added an edge of desperation to their touches. Each kiss felt like coming home, each caress a rediscovery of something precious. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, her head on his chest as he traced patterns on her back. The city lights twinkled through the floor to ceiling windows, creating a magical atmosphere. "What happens now?" Elise asked softly, voicing the question they'd both been avoiding. "Whatever we want," Marcus replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I'm not letting you go again, Elise. I can't." She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. "The company will still be there," he interrupted, "but I've learned to delegate, to trust my team more. I don't need to be there every minute of every day. And I've learned to balance my work better," she admitted, "to make time for what matters." He pulled her down for another kiss, this one soft and full of promise. "We'll figure it out," he murmured against her lips. Together, this time, they made love again as dawn approached. Slower this time, savoring each touch, each kiss. When sleep finally claimed them, they were wrapped tightly in each other's arms, as if afraid to let go. The morning would bring reality discussions to be had, arrangements to be made, challenges to face, but for now, in the quiet hours before dawn, they were simply two people who had found their way back to each other, two hearts beating in sync once again. Their reunion wasn't an ending but a new beginning. They had changed during their time apart, grown stronger individually. Now they had the chance to grow together, to build something new on the foundation of their enduring love. As the first rays of sun began to paint the sky, they slept peacefully, unaware that their story was about to enter its most beautiful chapter yet. Sometimes, love needs a detour to find its true path home. Chapter 9. Morning Light. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, painting golden stripes across the rumpled sheets. Elise stirred first, momentarily disoriented by the familiar yet strange surroundings. Then she felt Marcus's arm around her waist, his steady breathing against her neck, and memories of the previous night flooded back. She lay still, savoring the warmth of his embrace, the security she'd missed during their year apart. The city was awakening beyond the windows. But in here, time seemed suspended, in a perfect moment of peace. Marcus woke gradually, his arm instinctively tightening around her. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. He'd had so many dreams like this over the past year, waking up alone and aching, but the scent of her hair, the softness of her skin against his, the quiet sound of her breathing, this was real. "Good morning," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Elise turned in his arms to face him, her heart skipping at the tenderness in his eyes. "Good morning," she replied softly. They looked at each other in the morning light, both seeing the changes the past year had wrought. The shadows under their eyes spoke of long nights apart, the slight hollows in their cheeks telling stories of meals missed and comfort sought in work rather than food. "You're really here," Marcus said, reaching up to trace her cheekbone with gentle fingers. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find this was all a dream." "I'm here," she confirmed, catching his hand and pressing a kiss to his palm, "though we probably need to talk about what that means." He nodded, though neither made any move to separate. Instead, he pulled her closer, needing to feel her heart beating against his chest to reassure himself that this was real. "I was such a fool," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I had everything that mattered, and I let it slip away because I thought I had to prove something to my father's memory." Elise stroked his chest soothingly, feeling his heart racing under her hand. "We both made mistakes," she said. "I could have fought harder, could have made you see what was happening before it was too late." "No," Marcus said firmly, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Don't take that burden on yourself. You tried God. How you tried. All those dinners I missed, all those times you reached out, and I was too buried in work to see it." He paused, his voice breaking. "The baby." Elise felt tears welling up at the mention of their lost child. "I should have told you," she whispered. "Should have made you listen." "I should have been there to tell," he countered, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Should have been there to hold you, to grieve with you, to help you through it. Instead, I was in London, thinking a business deal was the most important thing in the world." He sat up then, pulling her with him so they were facing each other in the morning light. The sheets pulled around their waists, but neither paid attention to their state of undress. This moment was about something far more intimate than physical nakedness. "I've spent this past year building the company into something my father would have been proud of," Marcus continued. "The stock price has doubled. We've expanded into new markets, acquired failing companies, and turned them around. By every measurable standard, I've succeeded." He reached for her hands, holding them tightly in his. "But none of it means anything without you. Every victory felt hollow, every achievement empty, because I couldn't share them with you. I'd find myself turning to tell you something, reaching for the phone to call you, and then remembering that I'd lost that right." "I know," Elise said softly. "I did the same thing. Every successful surgery, every breakthrough in my research, you were always the first person I wanted to tell." "I've learned so much this past year," Marcus said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "About business, yes, but more importantly about what really matters. I've built a strong management team, delegated responsibilities, created systems that don't require my constant presence." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage for what he needed to say next. "I went to therapy," he admitted. "Started about 2 months after. After we ended, I needed to understand why I'd let work become more important than us. Why I'd fallen into the same patterns that had made my own childhood so lonely." Elise's eyes widened in surprise. The Marcus she'd known would never have admitted to needing help, would have seen therapy as a weakness. "It helped me see that I was trying to be my father instead of being myself," he continued. "That I was so focused on preserving his legacy that I forgot to build my own. And my legacy shouldn't just be about business success. It should be about love, about family, about building a life that's rich in all the ways that truly matter." He slid off the bed then, kneeling beside it so he was looking up at her, the position deliberate, humble, stripping away all the trappings of power and success that had come between them before. "Elise Moreau," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. I never stopped loving you, not for a single moment. This past year has taught me what life is like without you, and I never want to learn that lesson again. I know we can't just pick up where we left off, too much has happened. We've both changed too much for that, but I want to build something new with you, something better. Something that puts our love first. Tears were flowing freely down Elise's face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. Marcus continued, his own eyes glistening. I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm asking for a chance to court you again, to show you that I've changed, to prove that I can be the man you deserve. And then, when you're ready, if you're ready, I want to marry you again, to make new vows that I'll keep this time. He reached up to cup her face in his hands. I love you, Elise. I love your brilliant mind and your compassionate heart. I love how you light up when you talk about your work, how you never stop trying to make the world better. I love that you're strong enough to have built a life without me. But I'm hoping you might want to build a life with me again. Elise covered his hands with her own, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. You've really changed, she said softly. It wasn't a question. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he held himself, in the words he chose. Because of you, he replied. Losing you made me face things about myself I'd been avoiding. Made me want to be better. Not just more successful. She slid off the bed to kneel with him on the floor, bringing them eye to eye. I never stopped loving you either, she admitted. I tried God. How I tried. Threw myself into work. Moved to a new apartment. Tried to create a life that didn't have you in it. But you were always there in my heart, in my memories. In every dream of the future, I couldn't quite let go of. Is that a yes? He asked, hope lighting his eyes. Will you let me try to win you back? Instead of answering immediately, Elise leaned forward and kissed him softly, pouring all her love and hope into the gentle contact. When she pulled back, they were both smiling through their tears. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes to trying again. Yes to building something new. Yes to loving you better this time. They came together in another kiss, this one deeper, sealed with promises and possibilities. When they finally separated, the morning sun had fully risen, bathing them in golden light that seemed to bless their new beginning. We should probably get dressed, Elise said eventually, though neither moved to do so. I have surgeries scheduled this afternoon. I have meetings too, Marcus admitted, but they can wait. Everything can wait. He pulled her close again, breathing in her familiar scent. Just stay here with me a little longer. They did eventually get up, sharing a shower that led to more loving exploration of each other. Over breakfast, which Marcus insisted on cooking himself, showing off skills he'd developed during their time apart, they began the practical discussions about how to move forward. I want to do this right, Marcus said, watching Elise savor the omelet he'd made. Take our time, date properly, rebuild our foundations stronger than before. Agreed, Elise nodded. We need to learn each other again. See who we've become this past year. They spent the morning talking, really talking in a way they hadn't during their last years of marriage. Marcus shared his plans for restructuring the company to be less dependent on his constant presence. Elise told him about her research and her dreams for advancing neurosurgical techniques. When it was finally time for them to part, neither rushed to leave. They stood in the penthouse foyer, holding each other close, both aware that this parting was different from all the others during their marriage and their time apart. This time, they were parting to come back together, stronger and wiser. Dinner tonight? Marcus asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I know a little Italian place that holds some pretty special memories. Elise smiled, remembering their first date at Giovanni's. I'd love that. Tidin? 7 it is, he confirmed. I'll pick you up at your place. As she left the penthouse, stepping into the bright morning light of a new day, Elise felt lighter than she had in years. Behind her, Marcus watched her go with a heart full of hope and gratitude, knowing that sometimes love gives second chances to those wise enough to learn from their mistakes. This was their new beginning, written in morning light and sealed with promises they both intended to keep. Chapter 10. The Second Chance. The gardens of the Hamptons estate were transformed into an enchanted wonderland under the late summer sky. White orchids and burgundy roses created natural archways along paths lit by thousands of twinkling lights. The ocean provided a constant, soothing backdrop to the scene, its waves keeping time with the beating hearts of two people about to begin again. This wedding was different from their first, more intimate, more personal, more aware of the preciousness of the promises being made. Instead of 1,000 guests in a grand cathedral, they had chosen to celebrate with only their closest family and friends, about 100 people who had supported them through both their joy and pain. Elise stood before the mirror in the estate's master suite, her heart full of certainty and love. Her dress was simpler than her first wedding gown, but no less stunning, an elegant sheath of ivory silk that seemed to glow against her skin. Her natural hair was adorned with small white orchids, and around her neck hung her mother's pearl necklace. "You look radiant," Clara said, adjusting one of the flowers in her daughter's hair. "Different from your first wedding. More peaceful somehow." "I feel peaceful," Elise replied, meeting her mother's eyes in the mirror. "Last time, I was excited about the beginning of our life together. This time, I know exactly what I'm choosing, what we're building together." The past 6 months had been a journey of rediscovery. True to his word, Marcus had courted her properly, taking her on dates, learning who she'd become during their time apart. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, rebuilding their connection on a stronger foundation. He'd shown her the changes he'd made in his life, the delegated responsibilities at work, the boundaries he'd set, the priority he now placed on personal relationships over business success. She'd shared her own growth with him, her better work, life balance, her commitment to self-care, her understanding of what she needed in a partnership. His second proposal had come on a quiet evening at home, after they'd spent the day helping at a medical clinic in an underserved neighborhood. Something they now did together once a month. There had been no grand gestures, no audience, just the two of them on their old bench in Central Park, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of promise. Now, standing in her wedding dress, Elise felt none of the nerves that typically accompanied brides on their big day. This wasn't a leap into the unknown. It was a conscious choice to build a life with someone she knew deeply, loved completely, and understood truly. In another part of the estate, Marcus adjusted his bow tie, his movements calm and purposeful. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, but simpler than his usual business attire. Today wasn't about power or success, but about love and commitment. "Ready?" Julian asked, watching his cousin with a smile. "More than ready," Marcus replied, his voice steady with certainty. "I've been ready since the moment I saw her again at that gala." The ceremony setting was magical in its simplicity. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing the ocean, with an arch of white orchids and roses, marking the spot where they would exchange their vows. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, as if nature itself was blessing their union. As the string quartet began to play, their guests, the people who meant the most to them, took their seats. There was no formal procession this time, no rigid adherence to tradition. Instead, Marcus walked out with his mother on his arm, honoring both his parents by wearing his father's watch and carrying a photo of Victor in his pocket. Then Elise appeared, walking with her mother, and Marcus felt his breath catch, just as it had the first time he'd seen her on campus all those years ago. She was more beautiful than ever, her face glowing with love and certainty, her eyes fixed on his as she walked toward their future together. They met in the middle of the aisle, joining hands naturally, both smiling through happy tears. The officiant, a friend who had supported them through their separation and reunion, began the ceremony with words about love's ability to grow stronger through adversity. Their vows were different this time, not the traditional promises they'd made before, but personal pledges born from experience and understanding. Marcus spoke first, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered guests. "Elise, my love, my heart, my home, I stand here today not making promises about an unknown future, but making choices about a life I understand better now. I choose you, not just in the easy moments, but in the challenging ones. I choose our love over my pride, our partnership over my ambition, our shared dreams over individual success. I promise to be present, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, completely. I promise to honor the trust you're placing in me again, to nurture our love with the same care and attention I give to everything else in my life. You are my priority, my center, my true north. I love you with a love that's wiser now, deeper for having known loss, stronger for having found its way back home." Tears flowed freely down Elise's cheeks as she began her own vows. "Marcus, my love, my partner, my second chance, I choose you today with eyes wide open, with a heart that knows both the joy of loving you and the pain of losing you. I promise to communicate better, to speak my truth even when it's difficult, to fight for us before things become broken. I promise to support your dreams while helping you maintain balance, to be your partner in all things while maintaining my own strength. Our love has been tested by fire and emerged stronger. And I promise to honor that strength by choosing you, choosing us, every single day. I love you with a love that's mature enough to know its own worth, brave enough to try again, and wise enough to know that you are worth every risk. The exchange of rings carried deeper meaning this time, not just symbols of commitment, but tokens of redemption, of second chances seized and cherished. The bands were new, engraved with their new wedding date, and the words forever again. When Marcus slipped the ring onto Elise's finger, joining it with her grandmother's engagement ring, he marveled at how right it looked there, as if her hand had always been meant to wear his ring. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was both tender and passionate, a perfect balance of the familiar and the new. Their guests' applause seemed to merge with the sound of the waves, nature and humanity celebrating together. The reception was held in a clear-sided tent on the estate's lawn, allowing the sunset and then the stars to be part of their celebration. Instead of a formal seated dinner, they'd opted for elegant food stations and comfortable seating arrangements that encouraged mingling and conversation. During the celebration, Marcus rose to address their guests, his voice full of emotion. Thank you all for being here to celebrate not just our wedding, but our journey. Many of you were with us through our first wedding, our separation, and now our reunion. You've seen us at our highest and lowest points, and your support has meant everything. He turned to look at Elise, taking her hand as he continued. I learned some hard lessons during our time apart. The most important was that business and personal relationships aren't opposing forces. They're both about building something meaningful, about investing time and care, about maintaining balance and perspective. I lost sight of that once, prioritizing corporate success over personal happiness. But life has given me a second chance, and I promise you all, especially you, my love, that I will never make that mistake again. Elise stood then, joining him as he spoke. Together, we've created a new model for our life. The company still thrives, but now through delegation and trust, rather than constant personal oversight. My brilliant wife continues to save lives and advance medical science. But now, with time for herself and our relationship, we've learned that success means nothing without someone to share it with, that no business deal is worth missing life's precious moments, that love isn't just about grand gestures but about daily choices and constant presence. The celebration continued late into the night, but with a different energy than their first wedding. There was more joy, more awareness of the preciousness of love, more appreciation for the miracle of second chances. They'd chosen not to leave for their honeymoon immediately, instead planning to spend the weekend at the estate with their closest family and friends. It was another conscious choice, prioritizing relationships over grand gestures, choosing intimate connections over elaborate plans. As the evening wound down, they found a quiet moment alone on the estate's beach. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and the sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop to their happiness. Happy, Mrs. Langston? Marcus asked softly, holding her close. Happier than I've ever been, Elise replied, tilting her face up for a kiss. And this time, I know it's going to last. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the waves and holding each other close. Both knew that challenges would come. They were too wise now to expect perfection, but they also knew they were stronger together, better equipped to face whatever life might bring. Their second chance wasn't just a remake of their first attempt. It was something new, something stronger, something built on understanding and wisdom rather than just hope and passion. They had learned that love isn't just about the grand moments or the perfect days. It's about the daily choices, the constant effort, the willing sacrifice of ego for partnership. As they walked back to join their guests, hand in hand under the stars, both felt the rightness of their choice. Sometimes love needs a detour to find its true path, needs to be lost before it can be truly found. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. And it was all the more beautiful for having overcome its challenges. The night wrapped around them like a blessing, the stars witnesses to their new beginning. This time, they knew, would be forever. Chapter 11. Swiss Bliss. The private jet touched down at Zurich International Airport just as the sun was rising over the Swiss Alps, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Elise and Marcus had chosen Switzerland for their second honeymoon, 45 days of uninterrupted time together in one of the most beautiful places on earth. Welcome to Switzerland, Mrs. Langston, Marcus whispered, kissing her hand as they descended the plane steps. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the promise of alpine adventures and romantic discoveries. Their first destination was the iconic Bergenstock Hotel, perched high above Lake Lucerne. Their suite offered panoramic views of the lake and mountains, with floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the majestic landscape inside. A private infinity pool seemed to merge with the lake below, creating an illusion of endless water stretching to the horizon. "This is breathtaking," Elise gasped. Walking onto their private terrace, Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close against his chest. "Not as breathtaking as you," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "Thank you for giving us this second chance." Their days fell into a rhythm that balanced adventure with intimacy. Mornings often began with sunrise yoga on their terrace, followed by long breakfasts where they talked about everything and nothing. They had learned the importance of these quiet moments together, the value of simply being present with each other. They explored the surrounding mountains, taking cable cars to dizzying heights and hiking through flower-filled alpine meadows. On one particularly memorable morning, they took a private helicopter tour of the Matterhorn, its iconic peak piercing through clouds like a sentinel of stone. "I never want to forget this moment," Elise said, squeezing Marcus's hand as they hovered near the mountain's face. The majesty of nature surrounded them, making their past struggles seem small in comparison. In Zermatt, they stayed in a luxury chalet that combined rustic charm with modern comfort. Their private hot tub on the balcony became a favorite spot for stargazing, the clear mountain air revealing constellations they could never see in New York. One evening, as they soaked in the warm water while snowflakes danced around them, Elise felt a shift in her body, a subtle change that she, as a doctor, recognized immediately, but she kept the suspicion to herself, wanting to be certain before sharing her hopes with Marcus. They moved on to Gstaad, where they spent days exploring the charming village and nights cuddled in front of their chalet's fireplace. Marcus had arranged for a private chef to prepare their meals, but they often chose to cook together instead, finding joy in these simple domestic moments. In Interlaken, they took a romantic journey on the Glacier Express, the panoramic train windows offering spectacular views of the Swiss countryside. During a stop at a small mountain village, they found a charming old church where they spontaneously renewed their vows again, just the two of them, and an elderly local priest who spoke little English but understood the language of love. "I know we just did this officially," Marcus said, holding both her hands in his, "but I want to promise you again, here in this peaceful place, that you will always come first. No business deal, no corporate emergency. Nothing will ever be more important than us." Elise's eyes filled with tears as she made her own renewed promises. The simple ceremony, without guests or fancy clothes, felt deeply meaningful, a private recommitment to their love. Surrounded by the timeless mountains, their journey continued to St. Frant, Moritz, where they tried their hand at winter sports. Marcus proved to be a natural at skiing, while Elise preferred snowboarding. Their competitive spirits led to playful races down the slopes, always ending in laughing embraces and kisses that tasted of snow and joy. It was in Grindelwald, during a private gondola ride overlooking the Eiger, that Elise decided to share her news. The setting sun was turning the mountains to gold, and the moment felt perfect. "Marcus," she said softly, turning in his arms to face him, "I have something to tell you." He looked at her with such love that her heart seemed to expand in her chest. "What is it, my love?" "I'm pregnant," she said, watching his face carefully. "And from my calculations and the early scans I arranged, it's twins." The joy that transformed his features was everything she had hoped for. He pulled her into a gentle but passionate kiss, then dropped to his knees in the gondola, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little ones," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm your daddy, and I promise you'll never doubt how much you're loved." The rest of their honeymoon took on an added dimension of joy. Marcus became adorably protective, constantly checking if Elise was comfortable or needed anything. They spent hours discussing their future, making plans for the nursery, choosing possible names. In Geneva, they visited a small antique shop where they found two identical silver rattles, delicately engraved with Swiss designs. "Our first presents for them," Marcus said, carefully wrapping the precious items. They spent their final week in a secluded chalet in the Bernese Oberland, wanting privacy to process their happiness and prepare for their return to real life. The chalet's massive windows framed the mountains like living paintings, while its cozy interior provided the perfect nest for their expanding family. One evening, as they lay in bed watching the sunset paint the mountains, Marcus placed his hand on Elise's stomach. "I never thought I could be this happy," he admitted. "When we were apart, I thought I'd lost my chance at true happiness. Now I have you back, and we're going to be parents. It feels like more than I deserve." "You deserve every happiness," Elise assured him, covering his hand with hers. "We both do. And these babies, they're our second chance too. A fresh start, a new chapter, a chance to create the family we always dreamed of." They spent their last days in Switzerland, making plans and promises. Marcus had already begun restructuring his work schedule to ensure he would be fully present for his family. Elise had started arrangements to adjust her surgical schedule once the babies arrived. "We'll do it differently this time," Marcus promised as they packed for their return journey. Everything: work, life, love, family in perfect balance. Their last night in Switzerland, they stood on their chalet's balcony, wrapped in each other's arms as they watched the stars emerge above the mountains. The air was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of pine and promises. "Thank you," Elise said softly, leaning back against his chest. "For learning, for changing, for loving me enough to try again, for these precious lives we've created together." Marcus tightened his arms around her, his hands resting protectively over her stomach. "Thank you for giving me another chance, for loving me enough to risk your heart again, for carrying our children and making all my dreams come true." As they prepared to return to New York, both felt transformed by their time in Switzerland. The mountains had witnessed their renewed love, their growing family, their strength and commitment to each other. They were returning not just as husband and wife, but as partners in the truest sense, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The private jet took off as the sun was setting, the Alps glowing pink in the fading light. Elise rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, their hands intertwined over her stomach where their twins grew stronger each day. "Ready to go home?" he asked softly. "I am home," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Wherever we're together, that's home." As Switzerland disappeared beneath the clouds, they carried with them more than just memories of their honeymoon. They carried the peace of the mountains, the strength of their renewed love, and the precious secret of new life growing within Elise's twin heartbeats that would soon become the rhythm of their family's happiness. Their 45 days in Switzerland had been more than just a honeymoon. They had been a blessing, a renewal, a celebration of love, strong enough to overcome any obstacle. As they flew toward their future, both knew with absolute certainty that this time, their happiness would last forever. Chapter 12. Full circle. 5 years had passed since their Swiss honeymoon, and the Langston family home on Central Park West rang with the joyful laughter of twin boys. Julian and Theo, now 4 years old, were the perfect blend of their parents. They had Marcus's sharp intelligence and Elise's compassionate hearts, their father's determination and their mother's gentle spirit. The penthouse had been transformed from a showcase of success into a true family home. The formal living room now housed an extensive train set that the twins had built with their father, while the once pristine white walls were adorned with framed artwork from 2 budding artists. Family photos lined every surface, telling the story of their journey from love to loss to an even greater love. Marcus had kept his promise. He ran Langston Enterprises with the same success as before, but now he was home every night for dinner, never missed a school event, and had mastered the art of delegating. His office had a dad wall covered with his son's drawings, and his staff knew that meetings had to end by 5 o'clock p.m. unless there was a genuine emergency. Elise had found her own perfect balance. She continued her groundbreaking neurosurgical work, but had structured her schedule to ensure quality time with her family. She had also established a foundation that provided medical care to underserved communities, a project she and Marcus worked on together. On this particular evening, they were celebrating the twins' first day of preschool. The family sat around their dinner table, no longer unused and lonely but the heart of their home. Julian was excitedly describing his art project, while Theo added enthusiastic commentary, and then Julian announced, his eyes sparkling. "Miss Carter said my drawing of our family was the best because it had the most love in it." "That's because our family does have the most love," Theo agreed wisely, making both his parents smile. After dinner, as they sat in the living room watching their sons play, Marcus pulled Elise close. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here?" he asked softly. "When we were apart, did you think we'd find our way back to this?" Elise looked up at him, her eyes filled with love. "I hoped," she admitted. "Even when I tried to move on, some part of my heart knew there would never be anyone else for me." Their conversation was interrupted by excited shouts from the twins. "Daddy, Mama, look what we made." The boys had constructed an elaborate castle from blocks, complete with a drawbridge made from one of Marcus's old ties. It was slightly crooked and would probably collapse at any moment. But to their parents, it was perfect. "That's amazing, my clever boys," Elise praised, kneeling down to examine their creation. "Tell me about it," as the twins launched into an elaborate explanation involving knights, dragons, and a very specific family of mice that apparently lived in the castle's kitchen. Marcus watched his family with a heart full of gratitude. He thought about how close he'd come to losing all of this, how his obsession with success had nearly cost him everything that truly mattered. Later that night, after the twins were asleep in their rooms decorated with stars on one ceiling, planets on the other, Marcus and Elise stood on their terrace overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and a gentle breeze carried the last warmth of summer. "I have something to tell you," Elise said, turning in his arms with a familiar smile, the same one she'd worn in Switzerland 5 years ago. Marcus's eyes widened. "Are you?" She nodded, happy tears shining in her eyes. A little girl this time, just one. His whoop of joy echoed across the terrace as he lifted her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down gently. "A daughter," he whispered, placing his hand on her stomach. "A little princess to complete our family. The boys will be excellent big brothers," Elise said, covering his hand with hers. "They've been practicing with their stuffed animals." They stood together under the stars, dreaming of their expanding family. Their love story hadn't been perfect. It had taken detours, faced obstacles, even seemed to end at one point, but that had made it stronger, more resilient, more appreciated. 9 months later, Sophia Clara Langston joined her family, welcomed by parents who had learned that love was both a gift and a choice, and by brothers who thought she was the best thing since chocolate ice cream. She had her mother's eyes and her father's smile, and she completed their family in ways they hadn't known they needed. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenging days at work, occasional disagreements, moments of stress and exhaustion, but now they faced everything together, their love stronger for having been tested, their commitment deeper for having been chosen twice. Their story became known in New York society as the ultimate example of love's power to overcome all obstacles. But for Elise and Marcus, it was simply their truth. That sometimes you have to lose something precious to understand its true value. That love, given a second chance, can be even more beautiful than before. Every year, they returned to Switzerland for a family vacation, showing their children the place where their new life had truly begun. The twins loved hearing the story of how their parents had found each other again, and little Sophia would sleep peacefully in the mountain air where she had first been discovered. And so their love story continued, not ending with happily ever after, but growing richer and deeper with each passing day. Their home remained filled with laughter, their hearts remained full of love, and their family remained the living proof that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as its greatest challenges. For in the end, their journey had taught them the most important lesson of all, that true love isn't about never falling apart, but about choosing to build something even more beautiful from the pieces. Their love had come full circle, stronger for its journey, richer for its challenges, and more precious for having been lost and found again. And in the years that followed, as their children grew and their love deepened, Elise and Marcus remained living proof that some love stories don't end. They just keep getting better with each new chapter.